What's up, everybody? Today on the podcast, I have a very special guest, professional triathlete TJ Tollakson. TJ is a triathlete, Ironman champion in 2011 and in 2014. In 2014, he was also the North American champion. This guy had an incredible career as a professional triathlete. He now owns and founded the manufacturing company Dimond Bikes out of Des Moines, Iowa. This guy is just a straight up beast. Can learn a lot from him about health, wellness, and longevity. And this is a really interesting conversation as my journey into Ironman is still going. I recently actually pulled out of Ironman Houston, Texas, because I'm dealing with a knee injury. I ran a half marathon back in February and it didn't go too well. So I'm going to give my body some time to rest. But this conversation, I learned a lot from. I learned a lot from this conversation on what I can do for recovery when it comes to my legs, on what I can do for recovery and prevention of future injuries when it comes to supplements and nutrition. So obviously I love having conversations like this with people that are just really, really smart, leaders of their field, experts in their industry. And TJ Tollakson is the epitome of that when it comes to Ironman and triathlons. So here we go. Thanks so much for watching. Go ahead and subscribe, leave a comment, share with a friend, and I will see you guys soon. Here we go.
Thank you for taking the time out of your busy schedule to hop on the podcast today. Welcome to the Life Coach Zach podcast. We're all about health, wealth, happiness, and spirituality. Been sharing my Ironman journey with my following and audience for a while now, and I'm pleased to announce that I got the first Ironman world champion ever to be on the podcast here, TJ Tollakson. How you doing, my guy?
Great. So I'll start with that though, Zach. I'm a Ironman North American champion. My highest Ironman World Championship finish was 20th. It was a little rough for me to race in the heat in Hawaii, but I did win the Ironman North American Championships in 2014 in Mont-Tremblant, Canada. I also won Ironman Lake Placid in Lake Placid, New York. So,
amazing. Dude, that's incredible. You know, just finishing the Ironman obviously is really, for most people, it seems like a big deal. I can't even imagine the time and energy and attention and sacrifices and commitments that you had to make to become a North American champion. Tell me about that journey. What was that like, and what were some of the sacrifices that you had to make to accomplish that?
Yeah, it's a lot. It's a full-time job. You know, when you're racing as a professional Ironman triathlete, it is nothing less than a full-time job. That whole time I did own a business and have multiple employees during that time. And I like to tell people that, you know, life is a series of plate juggling. So if you've ever seen those guys that juggle plates professionally, you kind of know what I'm talking about, but they spin these plates all over their bodies. So they spin these plates, they have them on their hands, legs. They do like 30 of them at a time, right? And really the key to doing that is the key to doing anything well in your life is that you have to make sure you're paying a little bit of attention to every plate. Because if you neglect anything in your life for too long, what happens is that plate starts to wobble and eventually it'll fall. And so when the plate starts to wobble, that means you have to spend extra amount of time getting that plate up and going. And so your best thing is to really kind of focus on all these things at once. And triathlon's a really great sport because of that, because it allows you the opportunity to not overtrain in any one sport, right? So you're gonna do a little bit of swimming, a little bit of biking, a little bit of running, a little bit of strength and conditioning, core work, stretching, and then recover from it. The bad part is because you're doing a little of everything, it's very easy to take on too much, an entirety of too much, and find yourself just exhausted and wiped, burnout, injured, sick. And those are the things that happen to everybody. Yeah. So that's just kind of how I look at the entirety of being successful in anything you do is pay attention to everything as much as possible. Never spend too much time on one thing. Keep your eyes constantly shifting and focusing to have the best perspective for your long-term outcome.
Amazing. Well said. What do you think separates a winner like yourself from the people that are in like the top 5%? Like, what is that? Is it natural talent? Is it physique? Is it diet? Is it training? Is it recovery? What do you think is the most important thing that separates you from someone who is almost as good as you but never got that win?
Yeah, it's probably all mental at that point, right? The hardest thing is really going to be how you mentally prepare yourself. Do you actually believe that you're good enough? Are you putting in everything that you need to do? And the biggest thing when you talk about your mental ability and your powers to achieve things, that comes from proper preparation. So once you've actually done the proper preparation, you've paid attention to your diet, you've done the right training, you've checked all the boxes, that gives you a special kind of confidence that's really hard to rattle when it comes time to perform. Yeah. And if you've done it time and time again in training, it becomes really easy to do when it comes time for
battle. So what are some of the things that you've taken from your Ironman training and your life as a pro triathlete into life and relationships and into the real world?
Yeah, I mean, that's probably the biggest one is what I was talking about with the plate spinning. I'll go back to that because I just find it so important. If you dump me into the life that I've had, when I was 20 years old, if you just put me in here and said, hey, you're going to race triathlon at a global stage with 3 kids and a business and a wife, right? And said, hey, you're going to try to run all this stuff at the same time. I mean, I would just drown, right? I wouldn't be able to survive. But slowly, you turn up that thermostat 1 degree every 3 months. And next thing you know, 10 years later, it's friggin' hot in the kitchen and you're the only one who can stand it in there because, you've acclimated to it slowly over time, right? And so that's the biggest thing is our habits and our outcomes are super related, yeah. Right? And so what you do every day, and if you can look at it and say, I want to be 1% better every day, or I want to be 0.5% better every day, those add up. You're layering bricks on top of each other. And before you know it, you're an entirely different person. You're the person that you've dreamed of becoming your whole life. And it's not easy. Because if it was easy, everybody would do it. But it is a very, very simple process. You just have to have the discipline to go through.
And that's it, the discipline. Because you have your training plan, you know exactly what you need to eat, what time, how many calories, how many carbs, X, Y, Z. But you mentioned habits, and that's ironic that you said that because I just finished writing the chapter in my book that's coming out in a couple months about habits. And habits are obviously really important. Once you ingrain a habit in your DNA, you don't have to think about it again, right? I make my bed every single day, and I don't have to think about it, right? I go to the gym every single morning at 6:30 in the morning, and I don't have to think about it, right? But one thing that is super important when it comes to habits is that once you incorporate a habit into your life, it allows you the mental space and the attention and the mental energy to incorporate a new habit into your life. So if every single year we just bring in a new positive habit, eventually we're going to have a laundry list of all these incredible habits. So I love that you said that. That's amazing, man.
Yeah, it's super important. And, that's the biggest transition. I went from being a professional triathlete to being a retired professional triathlete, and what separates that? How do you make that transition? And I will tell you, a lot of my peers struggle with that transition, and a lot of it's because they have to look for new habits. Yeah. And I can tell you, the day after I retired, I was back in the swimming pool at 5:30 in the morning, just like I am when I was racing, right? And so I look at it and say it's the same. My life is the same. I'm still up at 4:45. 5 days a week, Monday through Friday, going through the same grind. I'm doing my workouts. I'm not training for the same purpose. I'm not training to be a world champion. I'm training for life. I'm training for myself. I'm training to become a better version of myself. And it's a different thing, but the process is still the same. And so the habits still need to be the same.
And that's the answer. That's what you've taken from triathlon training and being a pro triathlete and taken into your life, regardless of what the goal is. You're going to wake up early. You're going to get after it. You're not going to neglect your body. You're not going to sacrifice your relationships and your health for external bullshit, right? You're going to make sure that you're keeping the most important thing, because that's the most important thing. And even though our most important things change over time, getting super clear on what the most important thing is, aligning your priorities and values around that is when we really start to get happier and feel more successful. That's amazing. So let me ask you this. What's the most common question that people ask you as a pro triathlete?
Probably the most common question has to do with nutrition. More people ask about nutrition than anything else. And it's because it seems to be a big mystery, but it's not that big of a mystery. And I did a series of YouTube videos on some nutrition stuff. But a lot of times people will just ask me about my daily diet and what I eat and how I do. But then it gets into the specifics of what you eat to perform. What are you eating the day before a race? What are you eating the day of the race? What are you eating during the race? Those are probably the most common questions that I get. And you probably, even amongst pros, you probably see the most varied responses to those questions. Right. But you would see a lot of similarities amongst the very top athletes around the world.
And that's when you talk about race day nutrition, that was one thing that I was clueless on. I mean, you and I spoke briefly on the phone last week, and I kind of gave you the backstory about my journey into Ironman and where I'm going now. And, come race day, man, I was sucking down those goo gels left and right. In Cozumel, I was drinking too much water, and it's hard to figure out the right amount of water, right amount of, goo packets or whatever you want to take. And, you got to be really strategic in these things. What was the one thing when it comes to strategy, like on race day strategy? What was the one thing that you knew you had to nail? What was the X factor that was going to make you cross the finish line first?
Yeah, the biggest thing in an Ironman is knowing this balance between when to be strong and when to be forceful. Okay, so it's the yin and the yang of life, right? And so we look at that power balance and we say, the female energy, the feminine energy is very, very strong, not as forceful. The masculine energy is very forceful. And if you want to be successful at an Ironman, you have to balance those two forces as best you can. And so there are times, in the first 5 minutes of that swim, that's a masculine moment. That's power. You're thrashing, you're beating, people are swimming all over you. That's a masculine moment. Okay. The majority of an Ironman is not a strength moment. Okay. It's not a powerful moment. It's a strength moment. Okay. You're looking for that long-term strength. Okay. There's a time to be the lion and there's a time to be the tree, right? So a tree represents great strength, right? Wind blows it, the sun shines on it, winter, summer, tree stays still, right? The lion, great, awesome power, really forceful, but you have to recognize where you need that balance during the race. And so the largest part of any Ironman you're doing, you're just trying to be as strong as possible. And if you spend too much time trying to be powerful, trying to be forceful, you're just doomed for disaster. You can't make it to the end. And so we talk about that in terms of just how you're exerting your energy, but also when you're focused. And so the other big analogy with the focus has to do with a mag light. So like a mag light flashlight, those big ones that the cops carry, right? So you could turn the end of that knob, right? You could turn it and it makes it either really big focus or super narrowed. And so it's the same thing with your Ironman racing, okay? So those times when you need that masculine energy, you want to be forceful, you need a super concentrated laser beam of focus, right? Those times when you need to be strong, you need to broaden that focus, okay? Let your mind wander a little bit from the exact task, okay? And so you're not overly concerned about what's going on right now. You're just focused on, okay, hey, just run through all the systems checks, just kind of relax, have my place here. I'm not worried about whether this guy's passing me or this guy's passing me or this guy's dropping a gel or a bottle or what's going on. You just kind of let go of those things and feel the flow. Right. And that external focus is what's going to bring you to the finish line. Because if you try to do an Ironman with a focus like this the whole time, you're screwed. Like, you're never going to make it. Your mind is going to go crazy.
Wow. You're opening my mind right now, because there are so many moments during the race, and it is a long day. People don't understand. I mean, this is a long, long day. Much longer for me than it is for you. Obviously, you're finishing in 9-10 hours. I'm sure faster. I'm finishing, I did Cozumel in 14 hours. I was super proud. In the water, I was passing people left and right. I'm pretty good in the water. And then on the bike, I was trying to stay back. I'm not that strong on the bike, but I was passing people, and I was like, I feel strong. I feel good. Turn up the pace. And then I remember I was on mile like 70 on the bike, and I kept talking to people. I would talk to people. I said, hey, how you feeling? It's like, I'm feeling good. I say, what do you think you're going to finish in? He's like, I'm hoping to finish in 12, 13 hours. And I'm like, are you on track to do that? He's like, yeah, I think so. And I'm like, wow, I feel good. Am I going to finish an Ironman in 12 hours? And then I kept pushing, and I feel my feet going faster and faster. Then I got to mile 90. Mile 90. Get to mile 90. I'm telling you, my quads, I just feel it. My quads could not go any further. They could not go I could not pedal another freaking minute, but, obviously you do it, right? And, we're obviously in two different classes by a million, but, once I got to the marathon, I had to walk the first 9 miles. So I don't think I was balancing my yin and yang correctly, right?
Yeah, it's a tough thing to balance, right? And that's one of the biggest challenges of that, right? Is you have to know that usually when you feel good, okay, and there's no external reason to be forceful, just be strong, right? Just be strong. And when you feel bad, when you feel really bad, those are some of the moments when you need to exert some of that force just to get you out of that moment when you feel bad. But yeah, it's a Ironman. People say it all the time. It's about waging through these highs and these lows, because that's all it is. This giant roller coaster. You feel like $1,000,000, and then you feel like the last thing you want to do is take another step forward. And then somehow you convince your mind to just keep taking another step forward. And you start playing these games with yourself, right? You're like, all right, now I just want to see, can I get to that stoplight up there? Can I just get there? And then you get there and you're like, okay, now I need another goal. Right. I gotta get to that driveway up there, or that pink mailbox, right? I want to get to that pink mailbox in Cozumel. It doesn't matter what it is, but it shows you the power of what you're capable of doing. But it also is a lesson in goal setting, because it's just this series of small goals broken up at the end. And trust me, there are so many times in that Ironman where your next goal is just put the next foot in front of the other foot, right? Like you're down to that simple level where it's just, hey, my goal is to just take the next step and then take another step. Because obviously the worst thing you can do is stop.
Can't stop.
Then it's way, way, way harder to keep going. You can walk, you can crawl, don't stop.
Have you ever not finished an Ironman?
Yeah, I've DNF'd several Ironmans in my career, and I will tell you that it's a little bit different as a pro versus an age group, particularly because you're trying to do this for money. And so knowing that you're trying to do this for money, if things are really, really terrible, you have zero chance of winning any money, but you've spent the last 6 months training for this event in order to make a living. Sometimes the best thing you can do for your career is to stop before you do so much damage that it's going to take you another 6 months to start again. That being said, I actually, I've got kind of an interesting story. My very first Ironman that I tried to do was in Malaysia, and it was crazy, but it was a DNF, and it was a pretty terrible experience. I passed out on the run course. I had a heat stroke. I was carried by ambulance back to the medical tent, and I lost 12 kilograms of body weight. So 12 kilograms, that's over 25 pounds. So I weigh like 165 pounds, right? So like I was under 140 pounds in the med tent during an Ironman. Like that's some severe dehydration where brain damage starts to kind of take in effect. And so a lot of this has to do with that was my first Ironman experience. And again, since it was my first, I was 100% committed on making it to the finish line. And because of that attitude, like I passed out, I
Right.
blacked out. I was on the ground. Your body just goes into this survival mode. Basically, it wants to put you into a coma, right? To keep keep your brain alive. And so that was my first experience. And of course, it was kind of a rude awakening, a wake up call for me that said, one, you probably don't need to go back to Malaysia and race. So I didn't ever race in Malaysia again. I did other hot races, but never went back there. And two, it was like just you need to be able to make a call on when the performance matters and when the finish matters. Right. And I've finished several Ironmans where I didn't win any money and there was nothing at stake besides my own pride. And that becomes important at a lot of times as well. But when you are trying to make a living at this sport, man, you need to realize what's going to help the bottom line and what's going to hurt it.
Right. You got to be smart. You got to be strategic. Is it worth it to, go super hard and finish this if you're not going to win any money, potentially doing more damage to your legs or your feet or your mind and potentially your brain? Right. Well, I'm glad you're okay. That sounds pretty rough. I want to transition to more comedic side of Ironman. I'm going to tell a really quick story. So at Cozumel, as soon as you wake up, at least for me, it was like, got to take a shit. Like nothing is more important than taking a shit. As soon as I wake up, I took a shit. I'm like, yes, we get on the bus, we go to the swim start. And I'm like, all right, I don't need to go to the bathroom. And then about 15 minutes before the race starts, I'm like, I think I need to go to the bathroom. And everyone is shitting in the woods. Everybody is just, and believe it or not, I went over there. It was the first time I shit in the woods. So that was a first in my life. And it happened to be at Cozumel. And I don't know, it's just kind of a funny story that I've never told. You got any funny stories about Ironman?
Well, so I got to start with this. Like, you got to do some longer runs, man, because if you've never had to like dive in the woods on a long run and take a shit, like you haven't really lived in training yet. And I joke about this all the time because I live in Iowa. I grew up in Iowa, so even in high school, I did a lot of running through the cornfields. Right, so we got gravel roads that go for miles and miles, and you can run on gravel roads through the cornfields. They're super nice. But yeah, it was the first time I did it. I was probably a freshman in high school, out for a run. You got to take a shit. I mean, you're just jumping in the corn stalks, take a shit, shuck that corn as fast as you can, wipe up as best you can and go. And, there are times when there's nothing to wipe with. And so the real story then is, you pull the sock move, right? And so you make the rest of the run home with only one sock, but hey, you got to do what you got to do at times. I got a funny story about this. I did the first ever like sanctioned Ironman 70.3 was in the UK. It was in England at a castle/zoo called Longleat, and the logistics of it were super challenging, and I end up it was a split transition. So I ended up getting on this last bus from T2 to the swim start. And because I'm on this last bus, I'm going to be pressed for time. But then the bus driver actually gets lost on the way to the swim start. Then he tries to turn the bus around. So he pulls into a field to try to do this 3-point turn on this little road. He got the bus stuck in the mud, right? So he's like going forward and backward, trying to get this giant.
This is not the time for this.
No, I'm starting to like panic a little bit, and I'm a pretty calm person. I'm not super anxious about it, but I'm like, oh man, this is going to be rough. I don't know what I'm going to do. Meanwhile, it's still on my mind, right? Because I've not taken my last pre-race shit, right? Like it's a big thing, you got to get your last one out, try to get everything out of the system. So finally we get there, and I kid you not, there's 2 minutes between the time the bus stops and the race starts. And so I still have to like get my wetsuit on, get in the water and go. And so I'm throwing my wetsuit on as fast as I can, still haven't taken a shit. And the race starts and I'm running down the beach as the guys are in front of me. So they're like 30 seconds in front of me to start the race. Not the best way, not ideal to start a race, but I have a pretty good swim, a pretty good bike, and I'm out on the run and I got to take a shit so bad now, right? And it's usually the run where it happens, right? Like you feel pretty good in the swim, the bike, but then you start jostling up and down and stuff shaking, and oh man, it's coming out, right? So I'm like, all right, I gotta find a porta potty, right? I gotta find a toilet so I can do this. And it's a little trickier during the race because you could actually be disqualified if you're caught urinating or defecating in public. So I do a full one of the 3 loops on the run, and there's no toilets. So I'm like, shit, we're going to shit in the woods. Here we go. And I've got a one-piece tri-suit on. So I bolt into the woods. I down the one piece. I mean, so it's all hanging out, right? I mean, it's just me. Butt ass naked in the woods. And I mean, I just let it out. I mean, it's, there's no solid form in there whatsoever, right? Like that's what happens. It's been churning up. And so I'm done. I don't have anything to wipe with. I'm not even concerned about it. I just want to pull the suit back up and start running. So I pull it up as quickly as possible. I start running and my nuts are just burning and I can't figure out why. And I'm thinking like, what is
shit
it?
in your
like,
tri-suit?
Do I have chafing? Like what's going on? I don't know what it is, right? But like my nuts are just killing me. And a few miles later, I look down and I could see like there's some blood in the chamois. And I'm thinking, what the hell is going on? Like, did I have blood in my shit from trying to hold it in for so long? Like, I don't know what's going on. Finally, I finished the race. I had an okay race, like all said and done, it was fine. And then I'm asking where a bathroom is so I can check out what's going on. Well, little did I know that I went into the woods and where I put my tri-suit down, there were little sand burrs. And they stuck to the chamois inside the tri-suit. So when I pulled it back on, I had all these burrs that were stuck to the chamois. And so it started running. And of course, my junk's rubbing against these burrs and it's slicing me to pieces, right? So let's just say that night it was a really painful shower. But it was also a lesson, right? So it's like if this ever happens, you may want to consider the 2-piece tri-suit because that would have avoided that in the first place. And then 2, the other big lesson was like just make sure you know your surroundings as you're dropping your drawers, right? So, just hope that doesn't ever happen to anybody, But yeah, it's always an adventure.
Always an adventure. Oh my gosh. They say that the Ironman's not 3 events, it's 4 events, that unexpected event. And that was your 4th event. And that was in the UK?
Yes, that was in the UK.
God. What's your favorite race?
My favorite race, favorite really is going to be Hawaii just because it's such a special place, the Ironman World Championships. But that's a little cliche in that it is the World Championships, so it's super easy to say that. I'd say probably the coolest place that I raced. I'm going to go 2 different parts of the world that were super cool. I love being outside. I love activity and adventure. Did a race in Queenstown, New Zealand. Super cool. Went bungee jumping right after the race, like rode my bike from the race to the Kauai Bridge, which is like the original bungee jumping site. So that was awesome. And then I did a Ironman 70.3 in Bariloche, Argentina, which is Patagonia. So it's a little bit in the mountains, cool glacier lakes,
amazing.
Just an absolutely amazing place. And, both of those, I'm like, hey, look, I got to come back to these places at some point, come back with my family, come back with some friends, do a little more outside of the race. But
amazing. And that's, that's one of the coolest things about Ironman. You get to travel the world. You've been to Malaysia, the UK, New Zealand, Chile, Patagonia. I mean, Argentina, unreal, all these places that we get to go. I'm super grateful for Ironman. Is there any last words you have? Anything else that we didn't mention? Anything you got for us?
Now, the one thing I want to say is, Zach, you're on this journey, you're on this Ironman journey, and you've done a couple, and you've got a couple more planned, and you're doing this. Uh, the biggest thing I would say to somebody is like Ironman. Some people view Ironman as this like elite thing, like, oh, I could never do that. That's bullshit, right? Like, you can do this. Anybody can do this. And really, it changes with your mindset. If you start to believe that you can do this, if you go to an Ironman and you see some of these finishers out there, you will 100% believe that you can do
Right.
that. So that's what I would say. That's my challenge to your listeners out there, is to say, hey, if you're up for a really big challenge, watch one of these things and commit to doing it, and then do it, because you will find out so much more about yourself than you thought you were capable of doing. And that's one of the most powerful things you can do with your life.
I love that was your last message.
Go further.
I tell my followers all the time, my audience all the time, that there are 80-year-old women that are doing these Ironmans and that are passing me on the run. There are overweight, I'm talking really overweight people that are finishing these Ironmans and passing me. I'm 160 pounds with a six-pack. And anyone can do this. And I encourage my audience all the time, sign up for a race, whether it's a marathon or a 5K, get it on the calendar. It holds you accountable. It's something you got to train for. And I'm super grateful for Ironman. I know you're super grateful for triathlon and all the amazing things that's brought into your life. I want to thank you again so much for taking the time out of your busy schedule to hop on the podcast today. Someone I look up to, and if there's anything I can do to help you out at all, would love to do that. And it's been a pleasure, TJ.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Zach. Thanks for having me on. And I look forward to watching you crush your next Ironmans on a Dimond bike.
Absolutely, my man. Have a great day. I'll talk to you soon.
All right.